Everyone says you see it coming, but I didn't. Not really. Not after 15 years. Not after building the sales department from scratch. Not after turning a regional supplier into a national player with clients in 6 states and contracts big. Enough to keep the lights on through 3 recessions. But there I was, sitting across from Sloan Barrett, the new director of sales, while she tapped her French manicured nails against a company-issued tablet. "Your package is outdated," she said like she was ordering a salad. "We're cutting base pay by 40% and restructuring commissions. Everyone needs to sacrifice. My name's Cal Whitaker. I'm 53, with the kind of gray hair that started showing up early and never let up. I've been with Lanford Millworks since 2008, Senior Vice President of Sales, though that title never told the full story. I was the sales department. The relationships, the revenue, the reputation. I didn't just manage accounts, I managed trust. "Sloan," I said evenly, "can I see the new structure?" She slid a printed copy of a one-pager across the glass table. I glanced down. 40% salary reduction. New commission tiers that would make it nearly impossible to match what I'd been earning, unless I pulled in unicorn-level growth. Health benefits stripped to the bone. Stock options, gone. Sloan didn't blink. "We've done a full compensation analysis and aligned everything to current industry standards. This will better incentivize growth." Translation: "We think you're expensive, old, and replaceable." She had only been at Lanford for 3 months, brought in after the acquisition, by a firm out of Chicago, came in like a walking case study. Flawless wardrobe, corporate buzzwords, and a resume thick with strategy roles at places where people like me would have been swept aside before lunch. She didn't know the names of our top 5 clients. I knew their kids' birthdays. I placed the sheet back on the table, folded it once, then looked her in the eye. "Is there a timeline for this transition?" "Effective immediately," she said. There was a pause. "We need everyone on board with the new direction." I nodded slowly, then stood and extended my hand. "Thank you for the clarity." Her eyes flickered. She hadn't expected that. No argument, no negotiating, no begging, just a handshake. Later that afternoon, I packed up a few personal items. Nothing flashy, just a photo of my daughters at their college graduations, a monogrammed pen from an old client who used to call me his sales therapist, and a small award I won back in 2011 for exceeding $10 million in sales. I didn't slam drawers or mutter curses. I didn't make a scene. That's not how I was raised. And besides, I knew what I was taking with me wasn't in that box. As I walked past the glass offices, I saw Sloan watching me from hers, arms folded, brow furrowed. She couldn't read me, and that made her nervous. She thought she'd just saved the company some money. What she'd really done was hand off 15 years of relationships, warm, loyal, durable, to the first competitor smart enough to answer the phone. At the elevator, I passed Miles Beck, the CFO. We'd been through thick and thin together. Supply, chain chaos, client mergers, every pricing war imaginable. He didn't say anything, just gave me a look. A long one. He knew this wasn't about realignment. This was about replacement, about clearing the old to make way for the shiny new. When I got to the parking lot, I didn't throw my box in the trunk or peel out in a storm of gravel. I just adjusted my rear-view mirror, started the car, and drove off slow and steady, with everything that actually mattered still sitting with me in the driver's seat. Because while Sloan was busy optimizing her spreadsheets and restructuring compensation, she forgot the one thing they can't put in a quarterly report. Trust doesn't transfer. She thought she'd outmaneuvered me. She had no idea what she'd just set in motion. I kept the box light. There wasn't much I needed from that office anyway. A framed photo of my daughters taken at their graduation from UT Austin. A pen set gifted to me by a longtime client, back when handshakes sealed deals and appreciation meant something more. Then a digital thumbs up, and the award I got after my team broke the $10 million mark for the first time. That was in 2011. We crushed that number every year after. When I started at Lanford Millworks in 2008, We were doing just under $9 million in annual sales. Regional footprint, 3 inside reps, and a dusty corner office nobody wanted. But I saw something there. Products I understood, a market that needed care, and a leadership team that trusted me to build. 15 years later, we were bringing $75 million a year. Not from flashy marketing or tech overhauls, from relationships, from following through, from answering the damn phone on a Friday night when a project was falling apart and a job site needed materials rerouted before sunrise. That $75 million, my sales team was responsible for more than 2/3. My own personal accounts, relationships I managed directly, represented just over $14 million annually. That's what Sloan had just slashed with a 1-page memo and a consultant's smile. Those clients? They weren't names in a CRM. They were real people. Dave Linton at Hale Commercial? I once rerouted a flatbed delivery across 3 states for him after a snowstorm shut down their original supplier. Tina Ramsey at Copperfield Developers? I helped her renegotiate pricing mid-project when a vendor pulled out, and she was left exposed to penalties. They called me before they called their own teams, not because I was some miracle worker, but because they knew I wouldn't leave them hanging. And now, they had no idea what was coming. As I walked out of the building, I passed by the main showroom, the place we used to bring in clients to feel the product in their hands, to show them exactly what they were buying. It had been redesigned recently. More digital kiosks, less conversation. I paused at the glass doors, took a slow breath, and stepped out into the Texas heat. My sedan sat in the same spot I'd parked it every day for over a decade. Familiar. Dense, faded paint on the hood, and that faint rattle when the AC kicked in. I placed the box in the trunk and paused, hand resting on the edge for a moment. They thought this was about money. That's the part that made me smile. They actually thought I'd be upset over the pay cut, that I'd scramble, beg, or maybe rage, just enough to give them grounds for something more. They didn't understand that what I'd built couldn't be taken with a signature. They didn't fire me. They freed me. And now, every relationship they'd just tossed aside, every account they thought could be restructured or handed off to a junior rep with a spreadsheet and a follow-up cadence, was up for grabs. I adjusted the rearview mirror and caught my own eyes for a moment. Tired. A little. Finished? Not even close. Because what Sloan and her acquisition-era playbook didn't understand was that loyalty doesn't run on commission incentives. It runs on calls returned, promises kept, and jobs delivered on time, even when the warehouse is short and the clock is long past business hours. They'd treated me like a cost center. But out there, to the people who kept coming back year after year, project after project, I wasn't a line item. I was the guy who showed up. And now, I was about to show them just how much that was worth. The unraveling didn't start in the conference room. It started 6 months before that, quietly, subtly. When Evermond Capital acquired Lanford Millworks, they promised light touch oversight. That phrase should have been a red flag. I'd been through enough transitions to know that light touch meant they hadn't figured out what they were changing yet. But change was coming. It didn't take long. A new CEO was appointed. Jared Nolan, a finance guy from Chicago with zero background in manufacturing. First thing he did was scrap our quarterly client roundtables and start talking about margin modernization. The man had never set foot on a job site, but he had a polished answer for everything. Then came Sloan Barrett. She arrived with a click of heels, a stack of case studies, and a reputation for transformational sales leadership. She was sharp, no denying that, but sharp like glass, not steel. You could feel her measuring the room every time she entered, calculating how to bend it to her shape. She didn't waste time. Within her first month, my weekly executive syncs were moved to bi-weekly, then monthly, then canceled until needed. Travel budgets were frozen. Entertaining clients required 3 layers of approval. I once had to justify a $47 dinner with a purchasing manager I'd worked with for 9 years. One Friday morning, I got an email from one of my longest-standing clients, forwarding me a message from Sloan asking to touch base regarding 2024 strategic alignment. She hadn't mentioned it. She hadn't included me. That was the first real shot across the bow. It wasn't about strategy. It was about ownership. She wanted my accounts to become her success stories. She wanted to rewrite the narrative. Veteran underperforms. New leadership turns it around. Classic playbook. The worst part? She was dragging Becca into it. Rebecca Hayes was the newest member of my team. Bright, driven, a little green, but smart enough to grow. I'd taken her under my wing, coached her through her first few pitches, even helped her close her first six-figure deal. She reminded me of me 20 years ago, minus the gray. One afternoon, I walked into Saffron's Cafe, a spot near our office where I like to unwind. As I pushed the door open, I spotted Sloan and Becca seated near the window. They were close, leaning in, not a laptop in sight, plates pushed aside. It wasn't a team lunch. It was a recruitment pitch. When they noticed me, Becca's smile froze. She looked down at her fork. Sloan gave me a casual wave like I was some familiar face in a lobby, not the guy whose department she was actively gutting. The next day, I asked Becca about it. She mumbled something about team bonding and getting to know the leadership style. I didn't press her. I didn't have to. I'd been in the game too long not to recognize the signs. That same week, during a quarterly review meeting, Miles Beck, our CFO, pulled me aside. "They're looking hard at comp structures," he said, voice low. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean sales comp?" "I mean yours," he replied. "Legacy packages. They're building models based on industry benchmarks. You're the last one on the old system. That told me everything. I needed to know. I was a line on a spreadsheet now, a high one. They'd run the numbers and decided I was inefficient. Never mind the revenue. Never mind the retention. Never mind the relationships. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a problem to solve. They didn't care that my client list didn't need chasing, convincing, or flashy discounts. They didn't care that I still walked job sites in steel toes when needed, or that I could get a replacement shipment on a Sunday if something went sideways. They cared about optics. They wanted new. They wanted streamlined. They wanted shiny decks and software tools that tracked engagement and mapped journey paths. What they were about to learn, painfully and slowly, was that no algorithm on Earth can replicate what happens when a real human picks up the phone and says, "Don't worry, I've got you." The call came 3 nights after the meeting with Sloan. I was sitting in my home office staring at 15 years of sales reports I'd printed out like a madman. Peaks, valleys, streaks of growth that spanned recessions and lumber price spikes. Numbers don't tell the whole story, but they don't lie either. The phone lit up. Dave Linton. I didn't need to check the contact. I knew the number by heart. Dave was the purchasing director at Hale Commercial, one of my earliest accounts. We'd worked together since 2010, back when he was still getting approvals from his dad-in-law, and I was begging the warehouse guys to process last-minute change orders. "Cal," he said, skipping hello. "What the hell's going on over there?" I sat up straighter. "I take it you've spoken to Sloan." "She called me this morning," he snapped. "Talked for 15 minutes about vendor optimization and new partnership models. Then she sent over a digital dashboard login like I've got time to learn some new platform while juggling. 4 job sites." I didn't say anything. "She wants to renegotiate our terms. Said the discount I've had for 10 years no longer reflects strategic value." "What the hell does that even mean?" I rubbed my temple. "It means they don't understand how we do business." "No," he said. "It means they're stupid." There was a beat of silence. Then Dave asked, quieter this time, "You staying?" That one hit different. He wasn't just asking if I still worked there. He was asking if he should start looking elsewhere. If the guy who always picked up the phone was gone for good. "I'm considering my options," I said carefully. Dave grunted. "Well, consider this. If you land somewhere else, you call me first, before I have to listen to another pitch about agile procurement." When we hung up, I sat there for a long minute. The bourbon on my desk had gone warm, untouched. I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. I opened my drawer and pulled out a business card. Daniel Leary, CEO at Redmark Supply Group. We'd met at an industry expo the year prior, bonded over some dry chicken and our shared hatred of buzzwords. He told me, "If you ever get tired of pushing boulders uphill, give me a call. We're building something over here." I wasn't quite ready to call. Not yet. Instead, I called Maggie, my lawyer. She picked up on the second ring. "Maggie, I need you to walk me through my non-compete." "Already on it," she said. I figured this was coming. I explained the situation, how Sloan was reshaping accounts, cutting me out, pushing junior reps in behind me. I needed to know exactly where my boundaries were. She pulled it up. "Okay, so you're restricted from selling millwork products for 6 months, specific SKUs listed in your agreement. But there's no clause that prevents you from talking to clients, no clause against consulting, and no restriction on selling other construction materials." "In other words," I said, "I can't sell them oak paneling, but I can sell them everything else." "Exactly." I sat back, letting it settle in. They thought they'd boxed me out. They'd just narrowed my lane. They thought they'd clipped my wings. They just handed me a runway. 15 years of relationships, 15 years of handshakes, early morning deliveries, and late-night problem-solving. None of that disappeared because someone with a Harvard degree decided to change compensation models. They thought I was an old relic. Turns out I was infrastructure. And they were about to find out what happens when you rip out the foundation and try to replace it with a spreadsheet. I started at Redmark Supply Group 2 weeks later. The title was Senior Vice President of Business Development. But what Daniel really handed me was freedom. "We're not trying to reinvent the wheel," he said on my first day. "We just want it to actually turn when it matters." Redmark was lean, maybe too lean. They had the logistics, the sourcing, the infrastructure, but no deep client base in commercial millwork or high-touch B2B sales. That's where I came in. I didn't ask for a big team. I asked for 2 desks, a shared assistant, and a short leash to build it my way. Daniel didn't blink. "Whatever you need." I hired 2 young reps, both hungry, both teachable. Told them the truth from day one. "We're not here to chase numbers, we're here to catch trust." Then I picked up the phone, not to sell, but to listen. The calls started small, just checking in, seeing how things were going. I didn't mention Redmark. I didn't pitch. I didn't have to. By the end of week 2, Dave Linton from Hale Commercial had shifted his next 2 orders to Redmark. No announcement, no drama. Just a quiet PO that arrived in my inbox with a note. "Your guy nailed it. Thanks." Then came Tina Ramsey. Her email was even shorter. "Heard you landed. Can we talk?" It wasn't poaching, it was magnetism. I didn't need to twist arms. They were already pulling away from Lanford, exhausted by Sloan's rigid new processes, irritated by junior reps who couldn't answer basic questions without consulting a workflow chart. And me? I made sure everything worked. I personally walked job sites with our delivery crew. I triple-checked specs before shipments went out. I responded to texts on Sundays, because when you've spent 15 years building your name, you don't let it ride on someone else's promises. By the end of the first month, 4 of my top 10 accounts had moved business to Redmark. We didn't undercut pricing. We didn't wave promo banners, we just delivered. That's when the letter arrived. Certified envelope. Stamped from Lanford's legal department. It was as predictable as it was performative. Inside, a sternly worded reminder of my non-compete agreement, warnings about improper solicitation, a list of protected accounts that just so happened to mirror the exact client list I'd managed for over a decade. I smiled as I scanned it. They weren't confident. They were scared. I forwarded it to Maggie, who replied 15 minutes later, "Still clean, keep doing what you're doing." They couldn't see it yet, but the walls were already cracking. The accounts weren't just leaving, they were leaving loudly. Word was spreading that Redmark actually listened, that when Cal Whitaker said he'd handle it, it got handled. Didn't gloat. I didn't post about it, I didn't take victory laps, I just kept showing up. One job at a time, one call at a time, one quiet, steady reminder that trust has a memory, and mine was long. We met at a quiet bar just outside the city, the kind with low lights, dark booths, and a bartender who minded his business. Miles Beck was already there, hunched over a whiskey he hadn't touched. He looked tired. Thinner than I remembered. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, tie loosened. Not his usual buttoned-down self. "I shouldn't be here," he muttered as I slid into the booth. "But you are," I said, signaling for 2 more drinks. He slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside, a printout of Sloan's Q2 strategy deck for the Lanford board. At first glance, it was what I expected. Charts, buzzwords, slides on streamlining client management and digital first engagement. But halfway through, I saw the heading: Client Transition Plan, Legacy Accounts, Maddox Portfolio. I kept reading. There were scripts for Becca and 2 other newly promoted reps. Talking points to explain my retirement. Suggested language to downplay my role in the relationships. A timeline to shift my top clients to automated systems by the end of the quarter. Then I saw the projection numbers. $19.3 million. That was the real annual value of the accounts I'd personally managed, not $14 million like I'd thought. Nearly a quarter of Lanford's total commercial revenue. My throat tightened. "They never told you what your book was really worth," Miles said quietly. Oliver knew, but after the acquisition, they buried the number. Probably didn't want you having leverage. I set the papers down, folded my hands, and looked at him. "Why are you showing me this?" Miles took a long sip. "Because it's wrong, and because she's already missing her forecasts. First quarter was soft. This one's worse. She told the board it's just temporary disruption during the transition. But the clients aren't coming back." He shook his head. "No, and it gets better. She's raising prices across all legacy accounts next month. Told the board we've been underpricing the market for years." I let out a dry laugh. "So the plan was, cut me out, jack up the pricing, and hope no one notices the fire?" "Pretty much." I leaned back and looked at the ceiling for a second. The bartender dropped off our drinks. Neither of us said anything until he walked away. "There's something else," Miles added, lowering his voice. "They're auditing your expense reports going back 3 years. I didn't blink. "They won't find anything," I said. "I know," he replied, "but they're building a narrative. If more clients walk, they need someone to blame." It all clicked. The timing. The tone of that letter. The selective targeting. They were prepping the PR angle. In case it all blew up, they could say I violated something, breached trust, misused funds. Make it messy. Distract the board. I finished my drink and stood up. "Appreciate this, Miles. Really." He didn't look up. As I walked away, he said quietly, "I'm updating my resume. Just thought you should know." Driving home, I felt something strange. Not rage. Not even satisfaction. Clarity. They'd never valued me, not really. Not the way they pretended to at holiday parties or sales retreats. I'd been their shield, until I got too expensive to carry. The clients didn't see me that way. Neither did my new team, and the numbers. Well, they were starting to tell a story even Lanford couldn't rewrite. By month 3 at Redmark, we'd closed over $15 million new business. Every single dollar came from one place. Trust leaving Lanford and landing with us. My 2 junior reps were thriving. They were green, sure, but they listened. They learned. They didn't try to over-explain or hide behind email templates. They showed up, followed through, and asked the right questions. Word was getting around. Quietly, then quickly. Cal's people answer the phone. That became our brand. Meanwhile, back at Lanford, things were unraveling. Clients were fed up. I didn't even need insider updates. Clients were telling me themselves. "I got a 50-question satisfaction survey," one said, followed by a customer experience proposal. "I just need plywood delivered on time." Another. They added a new digital portal. It crashed twice. I still had to call someone, but the person didn't know what I was asking for. And then there was Dave. He called late on a Thursday. "Cal, I'm done." "Done with what?" With Lanford. We've stuck around longer than we should have, and I've got 3 foremen threatening to switch vendors without asking me. He didn't ask if I could help. He knew I could. I've got a contract ready, I told him. Standard terms, no fluff. Redmark can match your previous pricing, add weekend delivery options, and assign a dedicated rep who's already looped. Be good, Dave said. Send it, $4 million a year, 2-year term. That was the moment the dam really cracked. 2 days later, my phone rang, Sloan Barrett. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. Cal, she said, her voice tight. We need to talk. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near our new office. She was already there when I arrived, earlier than expected, hair slightly frizzed, tapping her spoon against an untouched latte. This has to stop, she said, skipping pleasantries. What exactly? You know what? You're poaching clients. Stirred my coffee. I haven't pitched a single Lanford account, I said. Every conversation I've had started with a client calling me. She leaned in. 4 major clients have left us in 8 weeks. All of them mentioned you by name. Sounds like a retention issue. Her eyes narrowed. We can make this easy or hard. Easy means you back off and we don't pursue legal action for breach. I didn't flinch. There is no breach. My non-compete restricts millwork sales. Redmark sells general construction supplies. We don't touch your SKUs. You're exploiting a loophole. No, I said. I'm respecting your exact language. Your lawyers wrote it. Maybe they should have been more careful. She sat back, rattled. Tried a different angle. The board is asking questions, she said. About revenue, about transitions. What do you want, Cal? A consulting arrangement. A finder's fee to step back from certain accounts? That almost made me laugh. I stood up. I'm not interested in arrangements, I said. I'm interested in doing my job well. That seems to be enough. I left her there, staring into her untouched drink, trying to calculate how much more she had to lose. I didn't need to twist the knife. The numbers were already doing that for me. 1 year to the day after Sloan slid that folder across the table, I was sitting in a corner office overlooking downtown Austin. My division at Redmark had closed $28.4 million annual business. 8 of my top 10 clients from Lanford had come over. Not because I chased them, but because when the people they used to trust disappeared behind automated forms and policy shifts, they followed the person who still picked up the phone. Redmark. Expanded our floor space. My team had grown from 2 reps to 12, with a dedicated client support group. We even got our own conference room, named after the first big account we flipped. Hail Commercial. Daniel walked in one morning with a bottle of champagne. Board approved everything, he said. Expansion plan, hiring budget, and they want you to consider a seat. I smiled. Let's take it 1 quarter at a time. That afternoon, I got a message from Miles Beck. Lanford Q3 earnings call in 30 minutes. Might want to listen in. I did. Lanford's new CEO sounded rattled. While we anticipated some disruption post-realignment, he said, we've experienced unexpected client attrition. An analyst jumped in. Is it accurate that you've lost over 20% of revenue? 2 quarters? Another added. Is Weston Commercial among those losses? They recently signed with Redmark. The pause was long enough to feel like a full sentence. We're in active discussions with all key clients, the CEO finally muttered. The next day, a headline popped up in an industry newsletter. Lanford bleeds market share after sales. Leadership shakeup. Sources cite the loss of senior sales leadership and client trust as the root cause of the decline. The article didn't name me directly, but it didn't have to. It quoted one anonymous Lanford employee who said, "They never understood what they were really cutting." That same afternoon, I got an email from Becca. Subject line, "Any openings at Redmark?" I didn't respond. The next week, my assistant buzzed into my office. "There's a Ms. Barrett here to see you." "No appointment." I raised an eyebrow. "Send her in." Sloan Barrett stepped into my office, looking like a faded version of the person who once tapped her nails across a glass table. Like she owned the building. Her designer suits had been replaced by something off the rack, Her posture was still sharp, but her eyes weren't. "Thanks for seeing me," she said. She didn't sit. "What can I do for you?" "I'm with a consulting firm now, Hamilton Group. We're studying client retention strategies, and I thought—" I held up a hand. "Sloan, I think you already know my strategy." She paused, nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I made a miscalculation," she said. "You did. The markets. Been talking about how you took down a company without saying a word." I didn't reply. She looked at the framed photo behind my desk, my team at our first holiday dinner, laughing, arms around each other, the real kind of loyalty. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "If you ever want to talk, trends." I accepted the card. Then, after she left, I fed it into the shredder. That evening, I drove to my daughter's house for dinner. She'd just been promoted to senior architect at her firm. "Dad," she said over grilled salmon and iced tea. "How's work?" I looked at her. My kid. Sharp, strong, building her own legacy. "Good," I said. "I'm building something that'll last." Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding everyone and myself what 15 years of trust is really worth, and proving that when they try to cut you out, sometimes the best thing you can do is keep building.